Everything begins in a place most people overlook, at a quiet moment. Not a dramatic turning point, not a life-changing event, just a small pause, a moment where you could react alert, but you don't tate. But you don't and first it feels almost insignificant, too small to matter, too simple to change anything. But that exactly why it's powerful. Because most people never notice it. Most people move too fast, pulled by habits they never question, guided by impulses they mistake for decisions. And that where everything starts to slip. You think you are re-choosing it, but you are not. You are reacting. You are following patterns that were built over time, reinforced without awareness, repeated until they became automatic. You wake up, you move through your day, you respond to situations many, but beneath all of it, something else is running the show, something quieter, something unnoticed. And because it feels like you don't question it. But once you slow down, even slightly, something begins to change. You start to see it. The urge to check your phone when you should be focusing. The sudden need to delay something important. The voice that tells you, just a little later, just this once, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. And it always sounds reasonable. What makes it dangerous. Because it doesn't feel like sabotage. It feels like logic. It feels like comfort. But over time, those small moments begin to stack. One delay becomes another. One distraction turns into a pattern. And before you realize it, your days are no longer shaped by what matters but by what say easiest. And the scariest part is say you don't even notice it happening until one day you look back and wonder where your time went, where your focus went, where your discipline went. But it didn't disappear. It was slowly tried, moment by moment, choice by choice, without awareness. That why the pause matters. Because in that pause, something shifts. You step out of the automatic, you interrupt the pattern, and for the first time, you see the difference between what you feel and what you do. That difference is everything. Because just because you feel something doesn't mean you have to act on it. Just because your mind suggests something doesn't mean you have to follow it. That realization creates space. And in that space, you regain control. Not over your thoughts, not over your emotions, but over your response. And that's where discipline truly begins. Not in force, not in intensity, but in awareness. At first it feels strange, almost uncomfortable, because you won. You're used to moving quickly, used to reacting without thinking, used to letting your impulses lead. So when you pause and when you hesitate and when you observe instead of act it feels unnatural. Your mind pushes back. It gives you reasons, excuses, justifications. Do it later. You deserve a break. You deserve a break. Isn't that important? And those arguments feel convincing. They always do. But something inside you starts to recognize them, not as truth, but as patterns. And once you see the pattern, it loses some of its power. Because now it's no longer invisible. Now you can choose, and that choice, repeated over time, begins to build something deeper. Trust, not in the world, not in circumstances, but in yourself. Because every time you follow through, every time you do what you said you would do, even when it happens as uncomfortable, even when no one is watching you send a message to yourself, a quiet one, but a powerful one. And, I can rely on me. That message starts to accumulate. It shapes how you see yourself. It changes your identity. You are no longer someone who tries. You become someone who follows through. And that shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens in small, almost invisible moments. Moments where you choose the harder option. Moments where you stay a little longer. Moments where you resist the urge to quit. Not because you feel strong, but because you decided to. That's what builds discipline. Not intensity, consistency. And consistency isn't exciting. It's not loud. It doesn't to give you instant results. Most of the time it feels like nothing is happening. But something is happening. Something deeper. You are rewiring how you operate. Recreating a system within yourself that doesn't depend on motivation, doesn't rely on mood, doesn't collapse when things get difficult. And over time, that system becomes your default. But there are something else you begin to realize. Comfort time has limits. It keeps things stable, predictable, safe, but it doesn't help you grow. Because growth requires tension. It requires stepping into something that feels slightly uncomfortable and slightly challenging and slightly beyond what you used to. Not extreme difficulty, not punishment, but deliberate discomfort. Choosing to do what is harder when the easier option is right there. Staying focused when your mind wants to wander. Continuing when stopping would feel better. Because when you stop avoiding discomfort, it stops controlling you. And that changes everything. Challenges no longer feel like obstacles. They start to feel like opportunities. Opportunities to expand what you can handle. Opportunities to strengthen your focus. Opportunities to prove to yourself, capable of more than you thought. And with that shift, your perspective begins to change. You don't just react to challenges. You observe them. You learn from them. You start to notice how you think under pressure. How you respond when things don't go your way. What patterns show up when you feel uncomfortable. And that awareness, it gives you an advantage. Because now you not just experiencing life. You understanding it. And that understanding allows you to adjust, to refine, to improve. Not perfectly, but consistently. You also begin to realize something important. Not everything deserves your energy. Some things are outside your control, and trying to control them only drains you. So you shift your focus from what you cannot control to what you can, your actions, your responses, your effort. And that shift creates clarity. You stop wasting energy on things that don't to move you forward. You stop reacting to every distraction. You become more intentional, more focused, more grounded. And over time, this way of thinking becomes natural. You don't react as quickly. You observe more. You choose more carefully. And in that process, something powerful happens. You stop being controlled by your impulses, and you start guiding your actions, not perfectly, but deliberately. And that is where real strength begins to show. Not loud, not visible, but steady, reliable, unshakable. Because now your actions are no longer random. They were aligned with what you value, aligned with who you are becoming. And that alignment removes friction. You are no longer fighting yourself. You are moving with intention. And when that happens, the discipline stops feeling like a struggle. It starts to feel like clarity, like direction, like control, not over everything, but over what truly matters. And that changes how you move through life, because now you are not waiting to feel ready. You are not depending on motivation. You are not reacting to every feeling. You are acting based on decisions you with rebel already made. And that consistency, it builds momentum, quietly, gradually, but powerfully, until one day you realize you're no longer trying to be disciplined. You are disciplined not perfectly, but consistently enough that it defines you, and in that consistency you find something most people are still searching for: control over yourself. And once you reach that point, something subtle but powerful begins to settle within you. It's a not excitement. It's a not motivation. It's a something quieter, a kind of steadiness, the kind that doesn't depend on how you feel when you wake up, the kind that doesn't disappear when things get difficult, the kind that stays even when everything around you feels uncertain, because now your actions are no longer driven by temporary emotion. They are guided by something deeper, a decision, a direction, a standard you yourself set for yourself. And what is this interesting, you don't feel the need to prove it to anyone. There is no urgency to show the world what you doing. No need for validation, because the real change is internal. It is in the way you think, the way you respond, the way you carry yourself when no one is watching. You start to notice it in small moments that used to feel difficult, now feel manageable. Things that once required effort, now feel natural, not easy, but familiar, because you've repeated them enough times that they become part of who you are. And that snats becomes so too you are, and you understand something important. Discipline is not something you turn on. It's something you build into yourself, through repetition, through awareness, through showing up, and again and again and again, even when it doesn't feel significant, especially when it doesn't feel significant. Because those are the moments that matter most, the ones no one sees, the ones that don't feel rewarding, the ones that test whether you weigh and truly committed or just temporarily motivated. And at this stage, you weigh truly no longer relying on bursts of energy to get things done. You weigh truly must math. You have created a system within yourself that operates regardless of how you feel. And that system gives you stability. It keeps you moving forward, even when things slow down. Even when progress feels invisible. Even when results take longer than expected. Because now your focus isn't just on outcomes. It comes on alignment, on doing what matters consistently, and trusting that over time those actions will compound. And they do, not all at once, not in a way that is immediately noticeable, but gradually, quietly, until one day you look back realize how far you come. Not because of one big moment, but because of countless small ones, moments where you chose discipline over distraction, moments where you stayed focused when it would have been easier to drift, moments where you followed through, even when it didn't feel important. And those moments, they build something, not just results, but identity. You begin to see yourself differently, not as someone who is trying to change, but as someone who already has. And that shift changes everything, because when your identity changes, your behavior follows. You no longer have to convince yourself to act. You act because it who you are, because it aligns with how you see yourself, and that removes the internal conflict that used to slow you down. No more constant negotiation. No more back and forth. No more, should I shouldn't door, and should I The decision has already been made, and your role is simply to follow through. But even with all this progress, there will still be moments where things don't go as planned, moments where you slip, moments where you fall back into old patterns, moments where you don't follow through the way you intended. And that's where most people lose everything, not because they failed action, but because of how they respond to that failure. They judge themselves. They overreact. They let one mistake define their entire day. sometimes even longer. And slowly, they fall back into the same cycle they were trying to escape. But now, you see it differently. You understand that one moment doesn't define you. One mistake doesn't erase your progress. One bad decision doesn't undo everything you ever built. Because discipline isn't it about perfection. It about consistency over time. It about consistency over time. It about returning to your path again and again, no matter how many times you step off it. And that perspective gives you resilience. You don't collapse when things go wrong. You adjust, you learn, you continue, without drama, without overthinking, without turning a small setback into something bigger than it needs to be. And that ability, and how you to recover quickly, and how you stay steady, and how you keep moving forward, and how you what makes discipline sustainable. Because life will never be perfect. There will always be distractions. There will always be challenges. There will always be moments that test your focus. But now you're prepared for them, not because you eliminated difficulty, but because you changed how you respond to it. You don't run from discomfort anymore. You face it, you sit with it, you move through it. And in doing so, you expand your capacity. You become stronger, not in a loud, obvious way, but in a quiet, controlled, reliable way. The kind of strength that doesn't need to be seen to be real, and as that strength grows, so does your clarity. You start to understand yourself on a deeper level. You recognize your patterns, your triggers, your tendencies. You know what pulls you off track. You know what keeps you focused. And that awareness allows you to make better decisions, not perfectly, but intentionally. And over time, those intentional decisions create a life that reflects who you are becoming. Not who you were, not who you think you should be, but who you chosen to become through your actions. And through your actions. And that's the key. Choice. Not the kind that happens once but the kind that happens every day. In small moments, in quiet decisions, in actions that no one else sees. Because those are the moments that shape everything. Those are the moments that build discipline. Those are the moments that define you. And when you begin to see it that way, you stop waiting for the perfect time. You stop waiting for motivation. You stop waiting for things to feel right. You act. Because you have already decided what matters, and that decision carries you forward. Even when things feel uncertain, even when progress feels slow, even when no one else understands what you are rebuilding. Because you understand, and that throws enough. You don't chase not validation. You don't need external validation. You don't need constant reassurance. You don't need to prove anything, because your actions speak for you, quietly, consistently, powerfully, and over time. That consistency creates something most people never experience, a sense of control, not over the world, not over circumstances, but over yourself, your thoughts, your actions, your direction. And in that control, you find freedom. Not the kind that comes from doing whatever you want. The kind that comes from being able to do what matters. The kind that comes from being able to do what matters. To feel like it. That's as real freedom. And it built one decision at a time. One action at a time. One moment at a time. And it all starts, with a pause.